This short video shows you how to set up your development environment and takes you through the steps to configure your XE4 IDE and Macintosh so that you can run, deploy, and debug your apps using your Mac, iOSSimulator, or iOS device. So let's get started by creating a FireMonkey mobile application for Delphi. Say File, New, FireMonkey mobile application. Next, you'll see a set of application templates that you can choose. There are 8 different templates. We'll just do something simple and start with the header-footer mobile application. It asks for a directory to place your project in. I've got one called Test1 here. And an iOS mobile help wizard comes up, which will take you through the steps required to configure your development environment, including installing Xcode. We need Xcode to be able to package up your iOS applications. So I already have Xcode installed on my computer. Let's go take a look. I'm using Xcode 4.6.1, which is compatible with iOS 6.1. After you've installed Xcode on a Macintosh, the next step that the iOS Help Wizard guides you to is to make sure that you have the command line tools installed. So let's go back to Xcode, and we can find out what's installed by saying Xcode Preferences. Go to the Downloads page, and it'll show you here that I've already downloaded the command line tools and installed them, and I've installed several simulators for the iOS devices. Going back to the iOS Help Wizard, the next step for setting up our environment is to install the Platform Assistant on the Macintosh. And the Platform Assistant allows the Windows-based IDE to talk to the Macintosh and connect via the Macintosh to the devices and the simulators so that we can test and run our applications. This Platform Assistant for the Macintosh is available both in your install directory here under Rad Studio. You can also grab it from installers.codegear.com. I've already grabbed it. It's here on my desktop. It's called rad PA server xe4.pkg. I'll just double click and install the PA server, and it will install on the Macintosh hard drive. And it's over here on my hard drive under applications, rad PA server. So I'll just execute it. And the first time you start it up after a reboot of the Macintosh, it'll ask you to log in and say it's okay for that tool to access some of the lower level interfaces on the Macintosh. So now the Platform Assistant server is running on my Mac. So next step is to run it, which I did. And now I need to create and test a connection profile on the development PC. So we can do that in a couple different ways. We can go into environment options by going Tools, Options, Connection Profile Manager. We don't have any profiles currently, so we can add one. A profile name, I'm going to call this My Mac, and the platform is OS X. You can also use the connection profile to set up remote connections to Windows desktops and Windows servers. And then I need to have the IP address or name of my Macintosh, which is called Samwise Gamgee. And if I put any password in when I started up the Platform Assistant, I would enter that as well. We can test the connection, make sure it's okay. It says it's fine. And now we have a connection profile that we can use. The next step is to configure which SDK that we want to connect in our project. We can do that by saying Tools Options, Environment Options, SDK Manager, and now we can add a new SDK for whatever platform, in my case, iOS device. It knows the connection profile for my Macintosh and what SDK that I want to develop for. It gets all that information through the Platform Assistant. It will now connect up and make sure I have all the information available for building my projects. The next step is to create a FireMonkey iOS app, which I've already done through the File New Project and shows the template. Let's go and look at our project. So here now in the project window, my simulator has the My Mac profile, and so does my device that I've connected. I can activate one of the target platforms and hit run, and it will compile the iOS application in the Windows IDE and run the simulator with my application that just has the title, header, and footer. And when I'm done, let's quit the simulator and go back to the IDE. We can also make sure the device is connected by activating the device project, and let's hit the run button. It'll again build the iOS application and send it through my Macintosh to my device. Because it's going to run on the device, it will need to code sign and sandbox the application. That's why we needed those command line tools. And it's asking me if those tools can access my developer key from my keychain, and I'll allow it. And here now is my application running on my iPad 4. So that's how easy it was to get my application running on the simulator. In order to create an application for a device, I needed to join the iOS developer program, which I did. Once you've done that, you can acquire an iOS developer certificate, and all of that information is available in the doc wiki, as well as in this wizard help that pops up. It tells you how to provision the iOS application with a provisioning profile. I've created one already. Let me switch back to Xcode and bring up the window organizer and go to my devices. And you'll see that I've got, for my Macintosh, I've got my iPad 4, and it's got a provisioning profile, which is my provisioning profile with my key. I've configured my profile for Rad Studio, tools, options, environment options, provisioning. And then you saw the application running on the device, and that's the end of the multi-page iOS application development help file. And that's how easy it is to configure. And that's how easy it is to configure your development environment that runs on Windows, and the tools that you need on the Macintosh side to be able to test your application with the simulator or test your application with the device. I'm going to show you how easy it is to create your first multi-device Delphi application with XE4. We'll say File, New, FireMonkey Mobile Application. We'll start with a blank application. We'll put down a button. Change its property to Click Me. And we'll double click on it to bring up the event handler. And we'll say hello from multi-device Delphi. We'll also add a TCalendarEdit component, and we'll add a label so we can display the result of the calendar selection. So the event handler for the calendar edit is on change. So if you change the calendar, we'll say label 1, text property, is going to get format date time. We'll put the month name, the day, and the 4-character year, and we'll pass it the date property from the calendar edit. And we'll run the application on the simulator. There's the show message, hello from multi-device Delphi. Go to the calendar edit. Notice now it uses the nice smooth scrolling date picker, and we get our display of our year, month, and day. And here's the application running on my iPad 4. I'll click on the button, bring up the message box, click on the calendar, and see the smooth scrolling date picker, and the result ending up in the label. I can take this same project and form and create a Windows version and a Macintosh version. We'll say add to project group, FireMonkey desktop application, an HD FireMonkey app, and we'll remove the new unit and form that was created. And we'll add to this project that same form, unit5.pass. Activate this project for Win32, compile and run. And here's my show message, and here's my calendar edit. Same thing by changing the target platform to Win64. Run the application on 64-bit Windows. Still works the same. Calendar edit. And then finally add OS X as a platform. It already has my remote profile. So now I activate that, hit run. It compiles for Macintosh. And here's the same application, bringing up a show message box, bringing up a calendar edit, and we're done. So there's the same source code running on Win32, Win64, OS X, on the iOSSimulator, and on the iOS device, all in XE4. Let's just create a file new FireMonkey mobile application. Here's my target platform's iOSSimulator that uses the Delphi compiler for Intel and the iOSSimulator, and then you have the device. So to show that this is actually native code, we don't cross-compile to another language other than machine code. We don't use Xcode for anything for compiling and linking. It's all done in the IDE, and then we send it over. I'm going to put a button down, and this is the sort of classic first application that we test to make sure everything is working on each device. I'll double click and say button1.text is equal to 42. And let's first go to the simulator, and we'll run this thing on the simulator. So let's compile and run. And now it's going to compile, deploy this to the Macintosh, and there the simulator, that's the application running. And here's my button, and it says 42. There's a few things the simulator gets you. You can choose what device it is, what version you're testing with. You can do rotate, shake, gesture. Over here in debug, you can set a location. Like I have it set to Apple's headquarters. That's on Infinite Loop over in Cupertino. You can put in a custom location and put in your longitude and latitude. So if you have a location-based application, you can do that. Now let's set a breakpoint in here and let's run with debugging. So when we run with debugging, here it is. Here comes our application again in the simulator. So when I click the button and I go back to my ID, it looks like it's hung over there because that ID is in control. Here it's hit my breakpoint. I can say view debug windows, CPU. Let's look at the entire CPU. Those are Intel instructions. So we're going right from the Delphi language to Intel machine code in our compiler and then sending that application over to the Macintosh. Okay, now it's running. So if we go back over here, it responded and set the text caption. All right, let's go back now to the IDE. And this will bring it home, I think, even more. Let's go and debug this on the device. So here's my, this is my real, I'm touching it. I can't show you that, but you notice I'm not doing anything special with the mouse up here. I can move it around. It's all happening on the device. And so then I'll go back to the IDE and we'll keep that same breakpoint. And now we're on the device connected through the Macintosh through the USB cable. And let's go and run with debugging through the Mac to my device. And there's project 15, the icon showing up. And then we'll see the application come up. Now there's the splash screen, and you can have custom icons, custom splash screen. Those are just project options for the application that you can set. Here's my button. I'll click on the button, and then I'll go back to the IDE. I'm at the breakpoint, right? There's the breakpoint. So here's how it brings it home again. Debug, CPU windows. Those are not Intel instructions. Those are ARM processor instructions. Notice the difference. So this is our compiler, our Delphi compiler for ARM, compiling inside the IDE, sending the app, code signing and sandboxing, sending the application through the PA server to my device, which is connected. So this says it more than anything else. We go right from source code right to native code, optimized native code for the ARM processor, and the CPU viewer proves that it's happening. Hit run to continue the app, and then I go back, and there's 42 on my button.
I want to quickly walk you through the steps to browse data managed by an Interbase IB Lite and or Interbase to Go database on your iOS device, and we're going to do that through the DB Express framework. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, there are two on this iOS platform. DB Express supports two databases as embedded databases. One is our own Interbase IB Lite or to go, and the other one is SQLite. And both of these databases can run on the iOS devices. And throughout all of this, we're going to use Visual Live bindings to help us rapidly create these applications. Here we are in Rad Studio XE4. I'm going to start with a new FireMonkey mobile application. I'm going to make it a blank application. Right. The first thing I want to do is drop a list box on here. I'm going to use a list box to display the values from the Interbase database. All of you who are familiar with Delphi, this is all familiar. We're doing nothing new so far. To this list box, I'm going to align its property to the client. Now we have these great default item styles. I want to set its default item style to be bottom detail. Now on this list box, I want to add a few more items. I want to add a list box header, and I want to add a search bar. And to the list box, we want to add a label for the title. And for this label, I want to align it also to the client. I want its style lookup, because it's iOS. We have all these great style lookups to apply. So for this label on my header, I want it to be a tool label. The text I put on there, I want it to be centered, and I'm going to make this my fish facts demo, because there's never enough fish facts apps that can be created. So now we have that done. So pretty much that takes care of the user interface. So now we're going to take care of the database connection, and for that, under DB Express, we are going to use. First, we're going to use a SQL connection. So on here, we'll drop a SQL connection. So to this SQL connection, we're going to connect it to our Interbase database. So for the driver here, you'll see for SQL connection, all the drivers are supported. In our case, we're going to use IB Lite as the driver. To the parameters, we're going to set the database value. So for a property called database, to make my life easier, I think I already have it set. Let's do it this way. Save me some typing. I'm going to grab this database and drop it as my database name. So set it there, and it gets set here also. So that's done. And we don't want people to have to be logging in with the ID and password, so I'm going to set login prompt to be false. So that part's all done. And just to make sure I can actually connect and my license key is valid, I'm going to set connected to be true. So that worked fine. If I had any errors with my connection, like can't find my license key or unable to connect, and then we would have to figure out what's going on there. Next, from DB Express, I'm going to drop a SQL data set onto the list box. And for the SQL data set, I'm going to set its SQL connection to our SQL connection. To the command text, this is the query we're going to run. And just to save myself some typing, I'm going to select here. And that will be my query. And that goes there. And just to make sure everything's working fine, set active to be true. So that's great. So now we're going to use the power of live bindings to take items from the database and populate items onto the list box. So bring up my live bindings designer. So what's important for me here is I want the common name of my database to be put into the item text of my list box. And I want the species name to be put into the detail of my list box. So the good news is at design time, we actually see the data coming up there. So that's also pretty cool. All right, so that's pretty much that. So we have our user interface set. We have our database connection set. We're ready to deploy this application to our iOS device. So now to deploy this to the iOS device, it needs three things. It's going to need my Interbase IB Lite license key, and as David mentioned, it's a free license key, and no charge to deploy it. We also want to give it our DB Express driver and the actual Interbase database we're going to use. So to do that, it's on the project deployment. We bring up our add feature files. Say to this application, I want to deploy to my iOS device or my iOSSimulator. I'm going to send it to both places. So here you see where you can add your IB Lite license key or your IB to go license key. Here we see them as text files, but let's say you're a VAR or a reseller and we gave you a slip file instead, which I have in my case. I'm going to manually add them. We want to add our DB Express driver also to my simulator. So that's all done. And you see they get populated here. And the last and final thing I want to do, well, two things. I want to manually add my two slip files. And for them, they come from Interbase redistribution. So I need to manually add my two slip files. So in my case, I may want to use both IB Lite and IB to go. So I'm going to add them both just to show you how that works. Now pathing on an iOS device and Windows works differently. So we need to physically tell it where these license files exist. So for the license file, they need to be in this location. So for my two slip files, when they go onto the iOS device, I want it to go here, and the other slip file, put it there. And the last and final thing I need to add is the actual Interbase file that I want to get embedded onto my iOS device. And that will be the DB demos database file. It lives here. I'm going to manually add that. And that file is right here. DB demos, right here. And for that, on the iOS device, it physically needs to live at this location, Startup Documents. All right, we are done. So that's everything we need. Now we can go ahead and deploy this. So and one more thing. So we need to tell the iOS device where this DB demos file actually exists on the iOS device. And for that, I'm going to use the SQL connection component on its before connect. So here I'm going to tell it, okay, since I already set this, I don't need this. All right, so now this is all done. We can go ahead and deploy this thing. For those of you not familiar, we use Platform Assist on the iOS side. Just to make sure the connection is working, I can connect. So now when I build this here locally, it gets deployed out to my iOS device, and it lives right here. So when I launch this, this is the embedded interbase database running on my iOS device. So that's all pretty cool. And what's great about this little search bar on it, without having to do any coding, I can say, you know, find me all the redfish, find me some bluefish, find me some yellowfish. So that's all great. So that was a quick walkthrough on the steps required to manage data from an interbase, you know, IB Lite or IB to go on your iOS device using the DB Express framework.
There were a couple questions about deployment and SDK support. And the SDK manager, you can take a look at that in more detail. It's in the doc wiki and elsewhere. And you'll see some more in the upcoming Jose Leon, What's New in the IDE, talks about the SDK manager, how you can support multiple SDKs and build for multiple SDKs. There was a question about how to deploy inside of a company versus the App Store. If you have 5 employees, you could have, or 5 users, you could just have them plug in through the USB cable and deploy to each of the devices. You can also, Apple has this thing they call the enterprise license, which allows you, in a sense, to set up to 100 devices inside your firewall and be able to deploy to those devices. We use that internally for testing. We have an enterprise license, and then we put apps on an internal server, and you just can use Safari browser, for example, from your iOS device and click on a link and load, do an ad hoc deploy directly to the device, as long as you register the devices to that enterprise account. So there's different ways to deal with how to deploy applications. Ultimately, it's the way you connect to the App Store. But if you're, you know, building an internal app inside of a bank, you're not going to want to put an employee's application in the App Store. You would put your consumer or your user apps in the App Store. So the enterprise way and/or the direct connect way is also available. And the question about, is a Mac necessary? It could be done with Windows and a computer. For iOS, we need the Mac. We need the Mac for a couple different things. One is to be able to code sign the application. We don't have those tools from Apple that we can run on Windows. As you saw in my demonstration, I have a Mac and I have my devices connected through the USB cable. And for the Mac, we don't need all of Xcode. Really, we just need the command line tools. There's a few command line tools that the Windows IDE talks to the PA server on Mac, and then through the USB connection to the connected device.